Welcome back. So today I am talking to theatre director and applied theatre practitioner Izzy Morgana Rabey, who is based in Wales and London. Just before the video gets started, don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and please leave a comment down below. How are you today?
I am good, thank you. Yes, I'm just catching up. I find weekends are really important, but like Monday and Tuesday are always like a kind of a mad scramble to kind of catch up with stuff. But yeah, I'm really good. I'm in the middle of mid Wales at the moment, which is where I've been spending most of lockdown, and it's very, very stormy outside today.
Yes, we're getting into where winter is coming.
Winter is coming. Like I'm like, I've not worn a cardigan for like 3 months. I'm just like, I feel autumn is upon us.
So Izzy, what are your thoughts on online theatre?
So it's really interesting because I think we had obviously these kind of live streams in cinemas was kind of, I think, our first sort of beginning of like seeing theatre on screen. As someone that comes from originally quite a rural place, I see the benefit of that in terms of kind of access to sort of national theatre shows and stuff like that, but the prices have always kind of remained the same.
Yeah.
In terms of online theatre, during this time, I've seen it as a really quite exciting, accessible way of people seeing theatre they wouldn't normally see. And I mean, personally, I will never think it compares to the real thing, but I've also seen benefits from it. And, you know, I recently directed something over Zoom, and people, like friends of mine who lived in America and stuff, and like more international friends, were able to see my work for the first time in like years, which was really lovely, you know. So in terms of kind of accessibility and actually getting bigger audiences, it's been really kind of beneficial, I think, for a lot of people.
Okay, and what was that experience like of directing a show over Zoom?
Yeah, so I was directing a piece called Wolfy by Ross Willis over Zoom for National Theatre Wales, who did this kind of series called Network, which was basically various companies across Wales and individual directors having a go at doing play readings online. But me being me as a director, I was like, I'm going to make this like as full length a production as possible. Like for me, like I think R&D is really important, but even when I do R&Ds, I really want it to almost become like quite a complete production. So I worked with a composer that I work with really often called Edith Crawford, who's amazing. And the piece was it's a piece about twins that get separated by the care system. And I was really fortunate that I cast identical twins in the piece who were living together. So that was really useful for me. I don't, you know, in terms of other friends I know that have directed over Zoom who don't have that privilege, you know, I could see it be a lot more challenging. For me, I really wanted to sort of, because over Zoom, it's not like directing film, but you still have to think about frames. So for me, I was constantly thinking about angles and where I placed the actors in relation to each other that kept it both visually interesting, but also quite live at the same time. And that I also sort of was really inspired by series like The Mighty Boosh, because I wanted to kind of create something that was visually really quite absurdist and kept people's attention, and also had a homemade feel, because Zoom can't really be anything but have a homemade feel to it. Do you know what I mean? Because you're directing in people's houses, you're directing in, you know, I mean, specifically with this project. So for me, The Mighty Boosh was like a really like good anchor for me aesthetically to think about as a director. So we were using kind of random household objects to be other things, like a boyfriend of one of the characters was a mop, for example. We had these potatoes that we turned into babies that were like, and I really wanted, because I have also seen a lot of online like play readings on Zoom, which have been quite, you know, actors sitting at a table reading a play. And I think, unfortunately, because our attention span, especially when it comes to screens now, is so short. As a director, I was like, right, okay, I want literally every second to be visually engaging. for the audience. You know, it was something I was really, really committed to. And with that also, in terms of transition, so we had moments where the actors had to go to another room in the house, like some action takes place in the bathroom and some in the living room, and then at the other part of the living room. So for me, those transitions are really important. So what we'd have is the composer that I work with, who I'll link you to her social media as well, because she's a really fantastic artist that is worth more people knowing about, created these beautiful soundscapes for transition. So it was like the audience had a moment of like blackout effectively. So the screen would go black and and there would be like a caption of what the next scene was, with this really rich transition music. And that for me was also really important. Like the sound for me was a really important element of making the piece as engaging as possible. When I direct shows from this year, really, I always release a song with this artist, which is about, so we released a drum and bass track for this production.
Yeah.
And that again was like a really exciting element of that process. You know, I'm a musician and I'm not into musicals at all, but I love music. So for me, music is really, really always a really important element of the shows that I do. And I'm really lucky now I've got to a point in my career where I have like a creative partner who really gets my way of working, and also is really up for being on this journey where we create a really rich soundscape, but we also release a song with every piece we create, which is really cool. So like the previous project we worked on together, we released like a really beautiful neo soul track, which was, you know, inspired by the play. So yeah.
So for all the songs like you've released so far, do you kind of like have an album, or can people find all your songs on YouTube or Spotify?
Yeah, so we've got it's basically released under Edith's song. So we've got, so Microwave is the name of the song. Again, I will send you a link. So that was the last play that we worked on together. And then Wolfy is just the name. So what we do is release the track under the play title. So it's just easy for people to find, really. And what we really want to do kind of post sort of this more restricted time is when we do sort of another full length production, that we release more of like an EP or an album. You know, I just want to kind of increase that way of working. Something else that just kind of jumped, I was reminded of, was in terms of when you're directing over Zoom, you actually have to be more direct with the actors, because you're not able to sort of read body language as clearly. It was interesting, I felt, and the actors said this, they wanted this as well, I had to be more direct. So where I would normally allow more gaps for kind of like the actors to sort of maybe explore things or something, I had to kind of be more direct verbally with them. And that was because that reminded me of when I was much younger as a director, you know, where you almost over explain everything, and you like, and I've really worked to change that way of directing throughout my 20s. But I had to kind of go back to that a bit, which was really interesting. So yeah, that was something that I'm really glad that the stage manager I was working with, she said, who had directed other kind of these play readings online, she was like, something that's come out of this, you know, she said before we start, like, is that the actors really appreciate you being more verbally direct with them because of Zoom. And I was like, that was so useful to know, you know.
So was it challenging organising your music along with the live performance via Zoom? Because I imagine that must have been like a logistical nightmare.
Well, it was kind of, what we did is we had an amazing sound engineer who was able to so Edith sent the tracks prior to the performance, and then it was able to be sort of plotted in like you'd normally plot sound in. And for me, it was also about seeing how things worked in terms of the length of transitions during tech rehearsals. So we had like a couple of pieces of music where the transition was long, even though it was like 15 seconds, it felt way longer. So we were like, okay, so we need to layer that track more. We need to make it more complex sounding for the audience, because otherwise it's going to sound repetitive. So that was a really interesting element of that process, was like, you think you've got this really rich piece of music, which we did, but then it's like, if you've got it for like over 5 seconds of a transition, it begins to get repetitive. So we worked on really quickly sort of doing some like more overdubbing and layering.
So while you were directing over Zoom, did you have any pleasant surprises at all?
Ooh, for me, it was really, really fun playing with Frame. Like, and you know, I've always, you know, I've been exclusively a theatre director. I've always wanted to sort of, I really want to at some point in the next 10 years explore film directing. But I really enjoyed playing with like perspective. So, you know, if you have like something kind of coming in from the side, and like what you doing that and stuff with, you know, actors was really exciting for me, and kind of can only really be done over a computer screen.
Yeah.
Because if you're doing like actual filming, it's much harder to do that sort of stuff. But, you know, with a sort of like single shot, you know, like just one camera, you can really play with like going up really close, and how that sort of nurtures the relationship between the audience and the actor is really exciting to watch. That was really enjoyable for me. And also for directing, you know, with identical twins, who I know really well and I've worked with for a really long time, it was really interesting when you've got two people that look so similar on screen for a really long time, how actually what I was really proud of with the piece is like you saw them very much as individual performers by the end, you know, and because I was sort of, initially I was like, oh no, I really want those lines to be blurred and maybe people don't know which twin it is performing which role, but actually they're such individual performers, and they're actually quite different as well in terms of their what they really excel at, and what they kind of play with as actors. It was really, really exciting to work with, you know, that and I was just, yeah, in terms of, I'm just trying to think of what other sort of pleasant surprises I had. I think for me, my confidence to be really ambitious with it, I'm always very overly ambitious as a director, but with this, it was one of the biggest leaps I've kind of ever done in terms of directing over screen, directing over Zoom. But it did end up working. So yeah. I'm pleasantly surprised at, not that I doubted the project at all, but like it actually went all right, you know, because it was such a new way for all of us to work. Yeah. You know, but it was doable and it went well.
So as a director, whenever you have your opening night, do you feel nervous? Like, you know how actors get butterflies beforehand. As a director, do you get butterflies or?
Oh yeah, I'm an absolute nightmare. I mean, I'm better than I used to be. But I very much, I mean, I always have to sit right at the back. I hate sitting in with the audience. Like I throughout the entire run of a piece, even if I've assistant directed it, which I've done more of recently because of like Royal Court work, I still hate being in amongst the audience, because for me as a director, I love watching the audience reaction to the work, but I also love watching the work. Mm-hmm. So for me, I'm like, put me in the sound box, put me in the lighting booth. I'm like, please. I just want to be as far away as possible from everyone. So yeah, I definitely get nervous, and I'm constantly watching the reaction of the audience. Almost, yeah, just as much as I'm watching the action on stage. So yeah, definitely. And I would like to say that it's got easier for me. I think I have more confidence in my work now than I've ever had before. So I'm kind of in a place where I'm like, cool, I've done as much as I can with this. And I feel that, you know, especially with the last two pieces I directed, I was really I felt a confidence I'd never really felt before. But I think that's because I'm, you know, I've just turned 30 and I've been directing and touring professional theatre since I was 22 that I've directed. So it's like, I've got to a point now where I'm just like, well, if you like it, you like it. If you don't like it, you don't like it. You know, I'm kind of, so in terms of kind of anxiety around people's reaction, I'm nervous for myself, but actually in terms of like caring what other people think, I don't have that as much.
Yeah.
You know, there'll be like a select few people that I will care what their opinion is. But in terms of the wider audience, I just kind of just want to share, being like, this is something I've created. Let's see what you think, you know?
So Wolfie, would it have been easier to do it pre-recorded?
Yeah, and I mean, like, it's funny because like you do bits that are pre-recorded for it. We had to do that, you know. I mean, it's really interesting. I'm saying this to you. I don't know like how widely that's known about this project. So here's how I don't get into trouble for it. I'm sure I won't. But like you do, just as like a contingency, you do pre-records because again, technologically, things could mess up. Yeah. So you do that as a safety measure anyway. So yeah. And I mean, in terms of other people you've spoken to, I'm not sure what their experience is, but that was very reassuring for me anyway, that we could do that. So it was still like the actors still perform the entire thing, like they don't have breaks at all, but it's just, you know, it's still a live piece of theatre. Yeah. But it's recorded, you know, like us now, you know.
That's interesting. That's interesting to know, actually.
Yeah. And was reassuring, you know, for me as well. Like I'm not brilliant at technology. I've done a bit. I've worked as an ASM, like, but I'm really not that experienced with stuff like that. So that was me, you know, that was an anxiety I had, you know, was about sort of linking up all the technology. But I was really, really lucky. I had a fantastic tech person on it and an amazing stage manager as well. So I was really lucky with the team.
So how did you get into directing? Because I guess you grew up in Wales.
I did.
And yeah, what was it like growing up in Wales? Were there any local theatres near you? What kind of like inspired you to take that step to say, oh
yeah. So I've got to be really open and honest. I come from a theatre family. So my grandfather was a jazz musician and both my parents did experimental theatre in the 80s to the 90s. So I grew up in a house where theatre was always being made. And so there were always people in the house that were working on shows. It was a really like busy house. And then my parents it was a time where, so my parents worked in university, Aberystwyth University, and it was a time where people could kind of really like develop their own practice and make their own work happen whilst also working at university, which is just not the climate we're living in as much anymore, you know. So they had I think it was a really kind of great situation for them. You know, they were able to kind of experiment with work and also have the stability of working in a university. So I grew up just theatre being a sort of part of my daily life, really. And it's only in my 20s I really realised it was quite unusual to a lot of other people's upbringing, you know, because I'd like wake up in the morning and there'd be like 10 people sleeping on our living room floor. And, you know, like I never sleep better than when I'm at festivals because I love the sound of people talking and nighttime activity happening around me. So I find silence really difficult because I was used to houses where there were gatherings happening a lot of the time. And then I went to an amazing youth theatre in my teens, Aberystwyth Youth Theatre. And then I went to university. And throughout my teens, I was very much like, I'm going to be an actor. And then I did a couple of directing things. I was like, oh, I actually really, really like this. But I was like, but no, like, I want to be an actor. And then when I went to uni, I realised I was like, oh, actually, I love directing so much more than acting. And I kind of graduated and came back to Mid Wales. And I really wanted to make radical work, contemporary text. I was like obsessed with people like Sarah Kane, Philip Ridley, Debbie Tucker Green. So I basically started a theatre company at 22 to just make the work happen that I wanted to kind of create, because I just knew, and I still know, that people that come from rural communities are just not, you're not taken as seriously, and there's not as much opportunity for you, you know, and if you're from a city, you know. So I was like, well, I have to kind of just make this work happen. And I was really lucky that I met sort of a creative collaborator, Jonathan Patton, who now works at the Pleasance Theatre. And we just started making work and trying to, and touring it on like no money, basically. So our first production was Phaedra's Love by Sarah Kane. And then we did another project at the fire station in Windsor. And then we did our first Arts Council funded project was in 2014, which was a Welsh play called Flowers of the Dead Red Sea. And I mean, when I say Arts Council funded, it was a tiny boat. It was like 5k, like, and we toured to London and to Cardiff, and we did it in Aberystwyth in Wales as well. So like I'm really grateful for that experience of making theatre on like a shoestring budget. And that has really carried me through the last sort of 8 years of making work, because it means that I'm quite economical as a director. It's like, okay, so what have we got to work with? Let's make the best of what we have, you know? And so for me, it's always there's a real emphasis on, you know, how good the acting is rather than the bells and whistles surrounding it. I'm at a position now where I can be a lot more sort of experimental with my aesthetics. So the last piece I directed, which we didn't actually get with my theatre company, which didn't actually get to tour because of COVID, it was the first time I'd worked with a big budget for my own theatre company. And we were able to build a massive multicolored climbing frame, which was like the basis of the production. And that was so exciting for me. And I've always been, I think aesthetically for me, if I had the money, I'm really excited about making work that's a real play space. Like I find it's so interesting how working with something like a climbing frame, for example, was so freeing for actors, but also really fun. So we're having fun on stage as well as acting, you know?
Yeah.
And creatively, it just opened up so many other possibilities, you know? So yeah, I'm really excited. I've always been really fascinated by like illegal playgrounds and just playgrounds in general. So I hope that in the future I can play around more with that, you know, as I sort of hopefully am able to kind of create bigger scale projects.
Izzy, thank you so much. Just before we go, where can people find you on Twitter?
Cool. So my name on Twitter is @Izzy Morgana, basically, and I post mostly on there. I also have 2 accounts for my other 2 companies I run. I run a festival going applied theatre company as well as my theatre company. So my theatre company is @Theatr Run Amok. Theatre is the Welsh word for theatres, but there's basically no E at the end. And then Under the Sun is my other company, and that is Danar Hael on. Again, it's bilingual, and Under the Sun, Danar Hael means under the sun in Welsh. So yeah, that's kind of how you can find out about me, really.
And just so the audience knows, all of those social media details will be in the description under this video, so you can find it there. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tunji. Cheers. Take care.
You too.
Okay. Bye.